Adrian
Okay.
will tell me when it's ready.
So in the meantime, you and I could do our comedy routine. We could do the Rozzy and Andy show.
Well, luckily for those of the people who are listening, we're ready with the live stream, so people don't need to hear our comedy.
I don't know. They might prefer the comedic. We might have a future, bro.
Yeah, we will do the London Ayn Rand meetup comedy night at some point.
Yeah, that would be fun. That would definitely be fun. All right, whenever you're ready.
All right, are we already live or? Oh, we're live. Okay, so welcome to the London Ayn Rand meetup. We have Dr. Andrew Bernstein via Skype from his home in New York. Dr. Bernstein is one of the leading objectivist scholars, um, the author of numerous books, including The Capitalist Manifesto, most recently the novel A Dearth of Eagles, and his next book, is it the next one? The Heroes and Hero Worship, The Nature of Heroism?
It's done. I'm not sure, when it will be published because I don't want to go back to academic publishers. I want a mainstream publisher for this book, and they tend to think it's too philosophical. But it's done. At some point, it's going to be published.
Well, we look forward to that, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Andrew Bernstein.
Thank you, everybody. It's good to be back in London. Wish I were there physically. I'm guessing it's cooler in London right now than it is in New York. But anyhow, it's cool enough because we're discussing the objectivist theory of values and valuing, and I'm guessing just make a few points, and then we could go to Q&A. Value. Ayn Rand defines values, of course, as that which we act to gain and or keep, and that's the broadest possible definition. And notice the key term in that definition is acts, because a value is distinct from a wish, a fantasy, a dream. I mean, I could lie. If I wanted to create wealth in my life and be a multi-millionaire, or maybe that's passe today, just to be a multi-millionaire, to be a billionaire, but all I do is sit around on the beach and sip pina coladas and watch the girls go by. You know that idea of creating wealth for myself, or for my family is it's not a value yet. It's only a wish or a dream at that point. We need to take action, to bring that into reality. Get a job first of all, and start saving money. Work out a budget, save money. Maybe get a second job, save all of that money because I'm living off the part of the proceeds from the first. Build a little nest egg. Start to invest it. Track my investments very carefully, and then I'm taking action in pursuit of wealth. Then we can properly say wealth is a value to this person. It's always a value is always the object of an action. So that's one key point I think I would make at the outset. Another point is I think where Ayn Rand is so beneficial, where she's so insightful, is that two elements of values properly understood. One is a value is something that, given human nature and the survival requirements of mankind, a value is something that objectively, factually promotes human life. It's not something that's harmful to human life. So, for example, an education, since man is the rational animal and the mind is our means of survival, training the mind, educating the mind is definitely is life promoting. It's an enormous value. A nutritious meal is a value. Close friendship with somebody that you could trust with your life and who can trust you with his or her life is a value. Similarly, for a romantic relationship with somebody of that type of character, a productive career in a field you love, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, whatever. As long as the field is one productive, it's actually creating wealth. It's actually creating goods and services that promote human life. And two, it's something that you personally love. So a value is something that's life promoting. And I think Ayn Rand's enormously insightful on this. So, for instance, something that's life harming is not properly to be considered a value. That is, loot to a burglar or to a criminal is not a value. Drugs to a drug addict is not a value. These are activities and substances that harm human life, that do not promote it. These are not values. So I think we need these are the kinds of things that people go after in the absence of values. Their life is empty or devoid of value. So that's one key point. A value is always something that's objectively life-promoting, given human nature and the survival requirements of mankind. And then the second point is values are egoistic. Value is something that you love personally. It's something that's important to you, that's special to you. So a good example of this is, Ayn Rand shows us in The Fountainhead, which I assume many of you have read, and if you haven't, get started on it yesterday, because it is one of the great novels in world literature. But the foil in the novel, Peter Keating, not the villain, not Ellsworth Toohey, but the foil, Peter Keating. Notice what he goes after in his life: architecture as his career, and Dominique Franken is a woman he marries. Now, these are the exact values of Howard Roark. He's an architect, the hero. He's an architect, and he loves Dominique Franken. The difference here, so why there's enormous. So architecture, obviously, is an enormously productive field. We need to build the buildings that our lives depend on, and that requires knowledge of architecture and engineering, and so on. And Dominique Franken is a brilliant, beautiful, intensely idealistic woman. In fact, I fell in love with her when I was 16, and I'm still in love with her, so you better not criticize her. But so Keating goes after the very things that Roark goes after. The difference is, for Roark, architecture is the field he loves. He's not going after architecture to please his mother or society or Ellsworth Toohey. And similarly, Dominique Franken is the woman that he loves. He's not marrying her because she's the boss's daughter or because her beauty impresses people when he walks into Lutece or the Four Seasons, with her on some 5-star restaurant in London or New York or Paris, with this beautiful, the woman is like walking into a restaurant with Scarlett Johansson, on you. That's not the reason he loves, why he marries Dominique Franken. It's not to impress the yokels. His first-hand judgment, he loves her and he loves architecture. Whereas conversely, for Keating, of course, he has no love of architecture. He wants to be a painter, and architecture is boring to him. And he certainly doesn't love Dominique Franken. He doesn't even like her. He loves Catherine Halsey. He doesn't even like her. He's terrified of her, because she sees what a phony fraud he is, and she says so to his face. That's what part of the reason you gotta love Dominic. But he pursues architecture and Dominique in a second-handed way to satisfy his mother, to impress society, to please Ellsworth Toohey. He's got no love within his own soul for architecture or Dominique. So the second key point about values is they're egoistic. It's something that is objectively life promoting and also something you love. So Ayn Rand herself, of course, as an example, knew from the time she was a child she wanted to be a writer. So you see how that satisfies both criteria. Writing is a very productive part of human life, and thank God Ayn Rand became a writer, because she wrote the two greatest novels in world literature, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, to enrich which enriches the lives of millions of readers, and she created the philosophy of objectivism, and you have Galt's speech in writing. You have many essays, and of course she taught it to Leonard Peikoff, who put it into writing. You're satisfied. So the last point I want to make on values is, before we go to Q&A, is I think in objectivist ethics, I think we could say values are the meaning of life. values are what add passion and meaning and purpose to our life. And the most fundamental relationship, and Ayn Rand makes this very clear in Atlas Shrugged, the most fundamental relationship an individual has is with reality. And so then the most fundamental value then is, what am I going to do with my life? And that's usually found in the form of a career. So I always wanted to be a writer since I was a little kid, and whatever it is, somebody wants to be a plumber, or somebody wants to be a nurse, or a rocket scientist, or a truck driver, whatever it is. There's some productive field that you love and that you find, or raising children, rearing children. There's some productive career that you love, and it brings great meaning into your life, and then having that as a foundation of our lives, our relationships with other good persons, as friends, as lover, your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, brings two honest, productive, hardworking persons who each have something fundamentally and personally in their lives. Each one has something that they love, can come together in a relationship, both as friends and as lovers, and then that also adds great joy and happiness to human life. And similarly with bringing children into the world and rearing children, those kind of people who are valuers can be the best parents. And then we live this all around rich life. Aristotle termed a long time ago eudaimonia, or a flourishing, fulfilled life with the emotional concomitant of joy or happiness. So that's basically values are the meaning of life. And if I was ever going to be a psychologist, which I won't, but if I were, if I had to deal with depressed patients, obviously I would try and treat them with whatever the psychological treatment is. But I would also have them read Ayn Rand and focus on values. Values are the meaning maker in human life. If somebody's having trouble getting out of bed because they're depressed for whatever reason, the one critical way to overcome that is to identify values. What do I love? What do I want? What brings meaning and purpose and passion into my life? Values are the meaning of life. Did I say that values are the meaning of life? If I didn't, let me say it. Values are the meaning of life. So we want to fill our life with as many life-promoting values as we possibly can. And I think that's a good introduction to Ayn Rand on values. And so we could turn it over to Q&A.
All right, before we go into questions, Andy, if you can hold the phone a bit further away from you, because some of the time we only see half your face. Or if you can.
Yeah, I'm getting excited. I'm moving around because this is a great topic that you chose. So how's that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's good. All right. So the first question is from Georgia.
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for
Good.
being here.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Okay, cool. My first question is, how do we acquire our values? Do they come from our childhood or from the parents' values? Question.
Okay. It's funny you should ask that question because I was just in Michigan over the weekend doing a seminar on how to be an impassioned valuer. And that's one of the questions that I deal with. But before I start out, let me give you a quote from Leonard Peikoff, Ayn Rand's greatest student. I remember him saying, I don't even remember the context anymore, but him saying once in a lecture, maybe it was in the question and answer session of one of his lectures, he was talking about how the problem is not to find values. The problem is to narrow down our values to a manageable list of things that we could do in a single lifespan. And the way he put it was memorable Peikoffism. He said, reality is enormously fascinating to a rational man. And I always remember that. That goes back 30 odd years. Reality is enormously fascinating to a rational man, a rational human being. And I know that really resonated with me because I was always a humanities guy. And so my PhD's in philosophy, but I love literature more than I love philosophy. And that's my first love. And I think history is my second. Philosophy is third. But I could have studied any of these fields and been happy. So I had to narrow it down to literature and philosophy. So I think the lesson there is, the world is filled with all kinds of good stuff and activities and people. And I think one way to discover what I want out of life is to get out into the world and look. There's I call this the explorer's premise. Explore the world literally, explore the world of books, and today I think explore the internet. And I think somebody who is a semi-rational human being would find more values than they could pursue successfully in a lifetime than have difficulty in identifying one or two.
Uh, do you think that nowadays the values are imposed on us? I mean, if you take media and what's popular, what's and so on. Do you think
Well,
they're imposed on us and they become very controlled and subjective by the society?
let me answer that in several parts. If we live in a dictatorship, then absolutely, our freedom to pursue our own values is severely curtailed by the dictator. And maybe we end up in a gulag, in a concentration camp or a slave labor camp if we go against the state. But in a semi-free country like the two countries we're dealing with here, the UK and the US, then I think if some individual has values imposed on him or her by family or by the media or by the government, then that's something that individual permits to happen. Because human beings have free will, we make our choices, and the media could or my family or whoever it is could preach to me until they are blue in the face about the virtues of religion or socialism or why we should prefer anti-hero art to heroic art, and I'm just going to reject it. I mean, I just flat out reject it. I did, I have, I will, I'll always do it. And so there's no getting away from the need to have some backbone. I mean, some people need a backbone transplant, but there's a need to get anything accomplished in life and to lead a good life and to fulfill yourself requires moral strength. It requires a certain amount of moral courage. So, I mean, we need to. I understand the question. There are social forces who would very much like to impose their values on us, starting in many cases with our parents and continuing through the schools, the government, the media. There's any number of such mentalities. And I think we need to exercise the free will that we have by virtue of being human beings to identify our own values and stand up for them, especially when we're 18, and we're legal adults and we can pursue our own values. I think any achievement in human life requires a certain amount of courage. Courage takes many different forms. To charge enemy machine guns during World War II is one form of it that I certainly don't have. But I'm glad that there are many freedom fighters who did. Courage I mentioned psychology before, to possibly face inner demons and work on them with a psychologist is another form of courage. And courage to stand up for our values against parental pressure or against social prejudices or whatever is another form of courage. Courage takes many forms, but it's necessary to achieve anything of value in this world and in this life, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
Hi, my name is Greg. My question is, so far up to this point, we've talked about values as, put it in Randian terms, things which we act to gain or to keep for the purpose of furthering life. So my question is, why life? What makes life a value? And also, how is it that man's life, how do I get from me loving my life to man's life qua man as a value?
Okay, there's a you you would have to take us into the deepest issues of moral philosophy, wouldn't you? Um, so for those of you who know the history of moral philosophy, you might be familiar with actually, I think it's the question of moral philosophy, and it was articulated brilliantly by David Hume, the Scottish philosopher in the 18th century. But what is the relationship between values and facts? Is there any relationship between values and facts? And Hume, of course, thought that the answer to that was no. Well, Rand's answer is very different, and that is actually, I think part of what makes a genius, in this case Ayn Rand, is the ability and the willingness to look at reality afresh. And she doesn't stay with the time-honored question, what is the relationship between values and facts? Rather, she tweaks the question. She just kind of turns it around. And the question she raises is, what is the fundamental fact of reality that gives rise to the phenomenon of value? And I mean, I think the question itself is a brilliant insight on her part. What is the fundamental fact of reality that gives rise to the phenomenon of value? Why is there value in the world? What is the need for it? What makes it necessary? What makes it possible? What makes it necessary? And when you look at the world, when you ask the question in that form, it points us directly to the answer, namely that living beings have to achieve certain goals in order to sustain their lives. And in an inanimate world, if the entire universe was simply a barren expanse of rock, and there was no life forms of any type, there would be no value. There would be no value. Valuing arises because living beings have to achieve certain goals in order to sustain their life. And if they plants, of course, have to dig their roots into the soil to gain chemical nutrients. They have to grow their leaves to the sun to gain sunlight. Animals have to hunt. Whether the herbivores have to find vegetation, the carnivores have to hunt. The herbivores, human beings have to grow crops and build houses and cure diseases. Of course, we need to achieve certain goals. If we achieve those goals, we can gain flourishing life. If we don't achieve those goals, we die. That's the fundamental alternative in reality that gives rise to the need of value. So why is human life, why is life the foundation of valuing? The issue really is not why is life of value. The issue is that life is the foundation of valuing, in the absence of which there would be no valuing. If there were no life, there are no values. So the other question: why is human life the standard of value?
Well, Andy, because we still can't see you most of the time. Can you put the phone down somewhere in front of you, and then?
How's that?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Right. So why is human life the standard of moral value? Because we're leading a human life, and for us, in order to survive, we need to achieve the values that are appropriate to human life. So for human beings, human life would be the standard of value. If there's intelligent life forms on another planet somewhere, the rational spiders somewhere, let's say, then the life appropriate to the rational spider would be, would stipulate the values necessary for that species or that life form to attain, and the life of the rational spiders would be their standard of value.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. It's Stella here now. I picked number 3 from the Q&A hat. So I've got an awesome question for you.
I'm glad you are here.
Well, Andrew, you are known in this public speaking objectivist intellectual circle as a bit of a black sheep, if you don't mind me saying, because you are the non-dry objectivist. You're always cracking up jokes. You always keep going. Have fun, guys. It's all about that. Are you having fun? Are you happy? Before we started all of this, you were cracking all the jokes. It was brilliant. So my question is, what is the link? Is there a link between values and having fun and being happy and happiness? How are these two things related?
That's a great question. I love it. So let me, as the black sheep of objectivism, let me answer that question. For all the other black sheep out there, but seriously, I appreciate the compliment, but many of my friends are objectivist intellectuals, and I think that they like having fun too. So. But I appreciate the compliment. But yes, the answer to your question is an emphatic yes. The goal of life is a certain emotional state, happiness, flourishing life, fulfillment with the emotional concomitant of happiness. That is the purpose. The means is reason. We can't, and that's for everybody who's read Atlas Shrugged. I think Francisco d'Anconia is the epitome. Ayn Rand dramatization of the reason emotion integration in Francisco's character, showing reason is the means to be this brilliantly rational thinker is the means, but to have this unclouded sense of joy in living. Is it okay in the UK if I use a French term, joie de vivre? The joy of living. The French are right about that. They may not be right about anything else, but they're right about that, right? Hey, I just made a joke, guys. You're supposed to laugh. Come on. All right, whatever. It's a tough audience, but the joie de vivre here, yes, that is the purpose of life, to achieve, to flourish, and have the emotional accompaniment of happiness. So it's yes, having fun, being happy. Doing all kinds of exciting things and enjoying life, experiencing life with a sense of joie de vivre. This is absolutely the purpose, and reason is the indispensable end. We can't get. It's ironic, isn't it? We can't achieve that end by following our desires, because people's desires could be life stultifiers. Some people desire to drink alcohol in excess. Some people desire, to use other toxic drugs. People desire all kinds of things. That some of them are irrational. We have to be rigorously rational in our thinking and realize, I may like alcohol, but drinking it in anything other than moderation is going to kill my brain cells. And maybe cocaine does make me feel good for a moment. I personally wouldn't know. I never tried it, never will. But maybe for somebody it does make him feel good for the moment, but as a rational thinker, he realizes this is a highly toxic substance. This could kill me. I'm going to find good ways that are not toxic, that are not life-threatening. Go out to dinner with my girlfriend, or go swimming at the beach on a beautiful day. There's all kinds of healthy, what they call the good things in life. They call good, clean fun. Good, clean fun. Good, clean fun, that's not toxic, it's not dangerous, it's not life-destroying, and identify rationally what those things are, what'll harm me, what'll promote my life, and then fill my life with the life-enhancing things, activities, and persons that leads to a state of joy. So I can't find joy. I mean, I'm not somebody who ever desired, drugs or alcohol, but there are people who are. We can't find joy that way, except in real moderation with the less toxic versions, alcohol, marijuana, things like that. In moderation, those less toxic drugs can add something to our life. But fundamentally, I find joy in writing, in the books that I've written and the books that I'm writing. I spend time with my daughter, time with my girlfriend. This is where the joy comes from the things and activities that actually promote human life, and you fill your life with those, and that requires a rational process of understanding, and that's the way to gain the joy and the happiness and just the fun in life, because these are life enhancing, not life harming activities. So there's a profound reason emotion integration that's involved here, and I think nobody's identified that as clearly and as brilliantly as Ayn Rand did.
Yeah, so hi, this is Josh, and I have a more experiential question for you, and it's
Yeah, go ahead.
how have you resolved major conflicts in your hierarchy of values? For example, career versus your love life, etc. That would just be an obvious one, but so it's more
Well,
of a
all
sort
right.
of, does that make sense?
Yes. How have
Yeah.
I resolved issues in the hierarchy of values, such as career versus my love life? Well, since I'm divorced, obviously I didn't resolve it very well. You know, yes, I didn't resolve the conflict between my writing time and my relationship with my ex-wife. Although I have learned from experience, and I know I could do it. I could do it much better. I could do it much better now. But the I think we need to be let me as an example. Let me go back to what Ayn Rand said about the reason why she chose not to have children, because as she put it, if you bring children into the world, or in the case of my ex-wife and I, adopt a child who was already in the world, you've accepted an enormous amount of responsibility. A child very properly makes rigorous demands on mom and dad's time. The child has every right to expect mom or dad or both to spend a lot of quality time with the child. Child deserves that. Child needs it. Your child deserves it. And so Ayn Rand said, my writing, the books I write, in effect, these are my babies. And I don't want to give the time. I can't bring a child into the world and ignore him or her, and I don't want to take time away from my writings. It's ironic, isn't it? Very often, the most responsible persons who would make the best parents are the ones who choose not to have children. And by the way, that's a legitimate choice. You don't want to let society or your family pressure you into having children if you don't want to have children. There's only one reason to have children. That's because you love children and you want a child in your life. But so Ayn Rand resolved that problem, or that potential problem, by saying my career comes first, and I can't bring a child into the world because it would be unfair to the child. And it's similar. If your career is so important to you or to somebody, and you're in love with a woman or a man, as the case may be, you may not want to get married. You may say, look, I won't be able to or willing to devote the time to my romantic partner that my romantic partner would have every right to expect from me in a marriage. So I may look for a more distant type of relationship to have human intimacy in my life, because my career is just of overwhelming importance. On the other hand, somebody might think, I love this person, spending time with this person is really great, and I'm willing to put in the time necessary to make that relationship go. And if that means less time on my career, so be it. I think it's a matter of prioritizing your values, and nobody could do that but you, because the good news is you get to be completely selfish on this. What's most important to you, and you prioritize your values. And I think the rational principle of time management is and must be time is used in accordance with your values. First value gets first call on your time. Second value gets second call on your time, and so forth. And so I think we need to be very clear on our value hierarchy. And I have a literal list written down, and put up on the wall here. Writing, of course, is at the very top of my list. But a literal list of the things and persons in my life that are most important to me. I strongly recommend everybody to do that. It objectifies your values. That literally turns them into an object, because it's a piece of paper out in the world now. It's not just a bunch of thoughts in your head. And then your integrity depends upon acting in accordance with what's most important to you. So your career, let's say, and your marriage or your romantic relationship, both of enormous importance to you, and then you make a conscious decision to divvy up your time such that both of these enormous values in your life get the time necessary for you to fulfill yourself, regarding them. And similarly, if you choose to bring children into the world. So I think having a value hierarchy, have an actual list, and then acting in accordance, and coming back to it, right? Check your premises. Your thinking may have changed. Your values may have changed. You may want to revise the list. But whatever your value hierarchy is, make sure you live in accordance with it. You live with integrity. Like I said, the rational principle of time management is time gets used in strict accordance with my value hierarchy. So, that's a good question. Who's next?
Hello, Dr. Bernstein. My
Hi.
question is related to market values. So recently, there's been a surge in cryptocurrencies, electronic currencies, such as Bitcoin, and their value has risen quite a lot recently because a lot of people have invested in them. So I wanted to know whether something can become more valuable just because a lot of people sort of think it's important, and how it relates to objective and subjective market values.
Okay, before I answer that question, let me state out. I'm not an economist or a finance guy, so I have very, very limited knowledge on those specifics. So, can something become a value to somebody because it has market value? Not necessarily. It becomes a value to you because it means something to you. Regardless, something has market value because a lot of customers want it. You don't necessarily have to be one of those customers. I mean, what would be a good example? A lot of people want to drive. A lot of people want a car, right? I have a car, but I mean, there's people living in New York City I know who don't need a car, don't want a car, don't own a car. So just because there's high demand in the marketplace for X doesn't mean that X is a value to you. So the great thing about values is we get to be completely selfish about it. What do I want out of life? What do I like? What brings happiness and meaning into my life? Is because it's a completely selfish phenomenon, and so we get to liberate ourselves from what other people may want, and fill our lives exclusively with what I want, or you with what you want. Now, the subjective objective value question is interesting, because the Austrian school of economics, of course, claims that values are subjective, and Rand claims that values are objective. And I think those two analyses are reconcilable. I think they're talking in different contexts, and using different meanings of the terms. And I'm not an economist, but it's so far as I understand. I remember once, you guys who are interested in economics, you might be familiar with FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education. And they're an organization devoted to spreading the principles of free market economics, especially Austrian economics. And I remember I've attended a number of seminars there, and I remember once asking Israel Kirzner, who's a famous Austrian economist. Professor Kirzner, he was an econ professor at NYU. I said, "What's the essence, of Austrian economics?" And he answered immediately: subjective value. Now, subjective value to the Austrians, in contrast, say, to Marx and others who hold the labor theory of value, or the labor theory of value claims that a commodity is valuable due to the amount of labor that's put into it. And the Austrians pointed out that this is just, Menger and von Bawerk and von Mises and people like that, pointed out that this claim is just false. I mean, I could put 1,000 hours of work into making some doohickey, and bring it to the marketplace, and perhaps nobody wants it. The amount of work I put into it's irrelevant. the value in the marketplace is determined literally by the subject, and I think the Austrians are using subjective here in a literal sense. The subject here, the subject-object relationship. So we're talking about maybe I spent 1,000 hours with a knife carving something. So I have this wooden object, this carved wooden object. The subject-object relationship. The object is the carved wooden thing, and I'm the subject. And so I value it highly. Let's say I put a lot of work into it, and I love it. But maybe other subjects, other individuals, other persons, maybe they don't value it at all. And so the market value depends upon what a subject or group or different subjects are willing to exchange for. So the Austrians use the subjective in the literal sense. The subject or the person, the individual person, the acting agent, the conscious agent, how he assesses its worth. Whereas Ayn Rand is talking about values being objective, meaning that in the sense that X is a value in the sense that it promotes human life. It's not depends. It doesn't depend upon somebody's feelings or desires, but X promotes human life. So you look at the two, and these two don't necessarily clash if we understand the different meanings. So X might have enormous life-promoting value. Let's say, what would be a good example of that? Innovative ideas. Pasteur, another Frenchman, but a genius, right? Pasteur identified what was one of the early scientists to identify that germs cause disease. And the medical establishment, as Ayn Rand points out in The Fountainhead about innovators generally, or often anyway, the medical establishment thought he was a madman. I mean, these tiny little microscopic organisms can kill an elephant. Ha ha ha. Well, yeah, they can. So the theory, which was true, has enormous value, life promoting value. It turns out to be enormously life promoting. But for a number of years, nobody cared, nobody listened. They wanted to put Pasteur in an institution. So, the marketplace wasn't interested in the theory, and they basically rejected it. And there's a lot of brilliant ideas. Objectivism has tremendous life-promoting value. Unfortunately, out of the 7 billion people in the world, there's only a relative handful who recognize it. So, Ayn Rand made a decent amount of money selling her books, but she didn't make the kind of money that, let's say, what would be a good example? Some metal band or some rapper, who are living creatively, but the rap or the heavy metal, I think, certainly doesn't have the life-enhancing value that Ayn Rand's books and philosophy do. But they may make a ton more money than Ayn Rand ever did, because millions of subjects in the marketplace spending their own money make their own free choice that this is of greater value to them than reading Atlas Shrugged. So some idea or book or some idea or book, or product can in fact objectively have tremendous value, but subjectively subjectively in the Austrian sense, that is the many subjects simply don't recognize it, and they're not willing to spend their hard-earned money on it. Conversely, there might be some object or idea that some object that many people do value, but has little or no has little or no life-enhancing benefit. Take recreational drugs as an example. A lot of people are willing to spend a lot of money to bring toxic drugs into their lives. They spend a lot more money on that than they spend on buying Ayn Rand's books. It's a very poor choice, but that's the choice they make. So the drug has a great deal of market value. Subjectively, in the Austrian sense, it has a great deal of value. Objectively, in Ayn Rand's sense, it has little or none. And then there are objects or things that are both of great value to life and that people recognize and are willing to spend their money on. Like pharmaceuticals that do in fact promote human health, and people recognize even the simple thing like aspirin. It does promote human health and pain relief. Gazillions of people recognize it, are willing to spend their money on it. So it has objective value in Ayn Rand sense, and it has subjective value in the sense of Menger, Baum Bawerk, and the Austrians. So they were speaking in two different senses, economically and morally, and there's an overlap at times, but there's times when there is not an overlap. We're speaking in two different senses, but they don't contradict, and very often they do overlap, and that's the ideal, right? That the marketplace, which simply means millions of customers recognize the life-enhancing value of X, and they're willing to exchange, a good deal of value to get pharmaceuticals being, one I think really good example. All right, how's that? I got the phone on the arm of the chair. Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
All right, good.
Evening. My question is, should you respect other people's values if they are contradictory to your own?
Well, that's an interesting question. Should you respect other people's values if they're contradictory to your own? Well, that's, the answer to that is contextual. I think it's generally yes. If you make a judgment call, and you in your best assessment of this person, this is an honest person who has different values, or maybe even to you has mistaken values, but is honest. So look. Let me break this down into different categories, because there's all kinds of optional matters in human life where people can properly choose very differing values. So my ex-wife and I used to disagree on whether to own or to rent. Now, I'm trying to remember the situation in the UK. I think when I was there, somebody told me that there's very few people who own their own home there. I don't remember. But in the United States, you can buy a home and piece of property, and it's yours. And maybe in the UK too. I'm not sure. But so there's a difference of opinion. My ex-wife wanted to own a home, and I prefer to rent. And there's different reasons to support either ones, which is why some people own their own home and why some people rent an apartment. There's different reasons to support each. And so it's an honest difference of opinion, and so honest difference in valuing on a matter that's optional in human life. And so it's important to respect the person who and the different values of a person who holds different values than yours, especially if you're married to her, by the way, or him, as the case may be. But then there's cases where the value is different. You may, being as conscientiously honest as you can, think, is this person really honest in holding it? I mean, in the 21st century, for somebody who's a socialist, let's say, Bernie Sanders in the United States, as what's his name, Jeremy Corbyn, I think, in the UK, is that an honest position to hold in 2018, given the history of capitalism, the actual history? I mean, given the actual history of socialism, full socialism, I mean, communism, National Socialism, given those actual histories, the people I just named who are called socialists, Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn, I know Bernie Sanders better than Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, he's not a full socialist. He's a mixed economy, semi-socialist. But is it honest in our day for somebody who's intelligent, and literate to want to mix full, elements of socialism with elements of freedom? That's like mixing, poison with nutritious food. Is that honest? No, I don't think it is. But the question was, should you be respectful? Well, if you're going to discuss political, economic issues with somebody like that, you need to be. You could properly choose. I'm not going to talk to this guy. I don't think he's honest, and I don't see any benefit in talking to somebody who wants to introduce these elements of socialism, and reduce the elements of freedom in our society, you could properly choose. I'm not going to interact socially with this person. I'm not going to talk to him or her. But if you do choose to interact socially and to discuss, then yes, it's important to be respectful, because we're reasoning. The way of trying to resolve these issues is by reason, not by name calling, verbal abuse, or anything like that. Then we become as bad as the leftists, who love to call names, and worse, like Antifa in the U.S. They'll smash your face in with locks and chains. So yeah, it's very important. Let's put it this way: courtesy, mutual respect is part of the reasoning process during social intercourse. Anybody we're going to have intercourse with socially, we need to be respectful towards. If we choose not to have intercourse with any person, not to have any dealings with them, then it's not a question. But yeah, socially, this is the way we have this part of the way we have a civilized society. It's an element of reason that we reason with each other, when we disagree, and we don't verbally abuse each other. So yeah, yes, the answer to that question is yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Hello, Dr. Bernstein.
Hi.
Hi. Got a little question that kind of relates to the last one, which is neat. So you may remember the example from Atlas Shrugged about 20th century motors and how they employed codetermination, and it basically ruined the company, kind of rotted it from the inside. Right. I was wondering what you think about a kind of collectively enforced sense of values kind of causing a race to the bottom morally. Do you think that's kind of destined to happen, or can there be ever a kind of, seeing as values are so individually defined, can there be some sort of successful cooperation, or is it always doomed to failure?
Well, cooperation and collectivism are not only two differing concepts, but I think they're mutually exclusive. Because collectivism means the subordination of the individual to the group, and politically that means to the state. And we've seen what happens when a consistent collectivism is imposed on a population. We've seen it under communism, and we've seen it under National Socialism or Nazism. If I paraphrase Ayn Rand, there's no cooperation at the point of a gun. We have the Nazis and the communists using slave labor. There's an interaction between the master and slave, but that's not cooperation. And so, cooperation means distinct individuals choosing voluntarily to interact with each other in pursuit of some goal. So, if you and I start a business, and we choose, well, you're going to run the business end, and I'm going to write the intellectual material. That's, for instance, in the American Capitalist Party, Mark Pellegrino and Joe Sanders, formed the party. They founded the party, and they hired me to write the platform and the policy. So we cooperate. There's a division of labor there. They run the organization. I do the intellectual work for them. Cooperation requires voluntary consent on the part of all people who will cooperate. Collectivism, subordinate individual to the group, tells us that the individual has no rights. Individual has only obligations. Politically, that means to the state. And of course, the state is unrestricted in what values it can impose upon any individual. There's under full collectivism, there's no possibility of valuing. The state utterly restricts your ability to value under full collectivism. As one example, I'm thinking of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, where they dragged all the city dwellers out of the city into the countryside in order them to not only farm, in rural areas where they weren't farmers, they were, urban citizens, but farm jungle lands which aren't appropriate to farm. And I don't know how many people starved to death, but the Khmer Rouge ended up killing, 25% of the population or more in 3.5 years. See, there's no possibility of value under full collectivism. So the principle of individual rights is the necessary political application of valuing, because if I'm going to fill my life, it follows logically. If I'm going to fill my life with my own personally held values, then I must have the individual right to do so. My liberty to pursue those values must be acknowledged, upheld, respected, and protected by the legal system. Can you guys hear me? Did we lose the connection? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, go ahead.
So I just wanted to follow up on an assertion you made a little bit earlier about the objective, life-enhancing value of objectivism itself.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself something of an empiricist, and so when I hear claims like that, I like to try and compare the claim to what I'm familiar with in actual practice. And the only model I have, I'm afraid, is stories I hear about Ayn Rand and her close circle of followers who originally tried to follow objectivism as purely as they possibly could and ended up making themselves profoundly unhappy. And so I was wondering how you might reconcile that with the claim that practicing objectivism is objectively life-enhancing.
Yeah, sure. There's as a preface to answering that question, let me point out that there's a fallacy in logic that's known as ad hominem, or personal attack, and that is, if somebody presents an argument and I disagree with it, instead of attacking the argument, I attack the arguer. And so it's fairly common amongst Ayn Rand's enemies, to say, well, Ayn Rand did this, that, and the other thing, therefore, she did this, that, or the other bad thing, therefore her books aren't any good or her philosophy is poor. Now, even if the claim about what she did in her personal life were true, and very often those claims are not, but even if they were true, they were irrelevant to the truth of her philosophy. Her philosophic principles, any philosopher's principles, whether it's Plato, Aristotle, Marx, Kant, Rand, whoever it is, any philosopher's principles stand or fall based on their relationship to reality, to the facts of reality, not on whether the philosopher or the philosopher's friends and associates were able to apply those principles successfully. That's irrelevant. It may have some interest if you're interested in the philosopher's biography, but the principles stand or fall by reference to the facts of reality, not by reference to how successfully the adherents put those into practice. It's possible that the philosopher and the philosopher's adherents are simply hypocrites, and they didn't put it into practice with any integrity. But that's irrelevant to whether the principles are true. So if we're going to examine the objectivist ethics, how Ayn Rand conducted her life, or how her supporters conducted their lives, is we simply push that aside. That has no value. And similarly for any philosopher, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, whoever it is, when we look at in regarding objectivism, is human life properly the standard of value? Should human beings pursue their values, or should they sacrifice them? Do individuals have inalienable rights, or do they not? And we look at the facts of reality to see whether they support those conclusions or not. Again, no matter, who was a good example, speaking of inalienable individual rights, Thomas Jefferson, who in my book on heroism I described at length as a flawed hero, because he's a slave owner, amongst other problems, other bad things that he did in his life. But does that mean that individuals do not possess an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? No, it's irrelevant. Individuals possess an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness depending upon whether or not those things promote human life or not, does not depend on whether Thomas Jefferson consistently practiced them or not. So that's true of any thinker: Rand, Jefferson, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, whoever it is.
Hi, my name is George. I have a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Initially, you said that the values are mostly built around the work. For example, I want to be a doctor in my life. I want to be an athlete. What happens for some guy that he achieved all his goals? He went to the peak. He became rich. For example, he doesn't have to work anymore. And what happens with this guy? He has to go to the next goal that he put, or he has to maintain the existing goal. So what happens after you don't have any more to work? Let's say a specific example. You don't have any more to work, and you have more than you ever have, more than you ever need, money-wise. What you do? You go to can you live happy by going to the next goal, or you need to still continue what you're doing in the next level? You need to upgrade what you do. It's going to be always a next level, or you go to the next goal?
You know, the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about this is that, well, I'd like to be that guy. You know, I'd like to find out. You know, that I'm so fulfilled in what I wanted out of life that that there's no more worlds for me to conquer. Now notice something here. There is a widespread practice for many people who've done exactly that. It even has a name. It's called retirement. You know, and there are people who are retired. I know some personally, and perhaps you do too, who have fulfilled themselves in their career. They're very happy with what they did, you know, in their life. They've made enough money, they don't have to work anymore, and they retire. Now, some people retire and they die right away because their work was their life, and now they have no meaning. But I've known people who retired for decades, you know, and who would do all kinds of fun things with their life, and were very fulfilled in their career. And I think the answer to the question is, reality is enormously fascinating to a rational man. There are so many different things that somebody might do that you know that they find fulfillment in. Now, I'm not going to retire because I'm going to keep writing until the day I die. But that's me. Other people retire, and I know somebody. I won't mention names here. Was an engineer at Google, made good money. Retired, lives in Colorado during the winters, spends every day skiing, rest of the year travels, does a lot of traveling, you know, and there's all different ways of finding joy and fulfillment in life. So somebody may retire and then do all kinds of fun things for the rest of their life and be happy because they were very pleased with what they did in their career. Some people start a second career. I had a former student, so I taught night classes at SUNY Purchase, State University of New York at Purchase, and had a lot of adults. There was one adult who was 20 years older than I was at the time, who was retiring from as an MD from his medical practice after 30 years in practice. He wanted to be a writer. He was moving on to a second career, as a writer. So I think there are all kinds of optional matters in life. Somebody may be fulfilled in their career and want to go even further in that field, or somebody may want to leave that field and adopt a second career. Somebody may want to retire altogether and spend the rest of their life having fun, traveling the world with their husband or wife, spend a lot more time with their children or grandchildren. There's all kinds of options for somebody who's fulfilled in their career or in their first career. There's all kinds of options. That's good news.
Nice. Thank you.
Sure.
I wanted to speak about something you mentioned earlier. So you said values don't apply to inanimate objects and that they can only apply to living beings. So animals don't reason and they don't make choices largely, and they mostly operate on the perceptual level. do animals value in the same way that human beings value?
Well, as stated with that question, the answer would have to be no. They don't value in the same way that human beings value. But if the question is, do animals value, then yes, and they certainly value their life. And you could see, if you threaten them, you could see the fear. The fear. If you have a cat or a dog, don't try this at home. But as a thought experiment, if you brandish a big stick and you scream at the dog or the cat and go running at them, then you're gonna beat them with a steel pipe. You'll see the fear in their eyes. You'll see them run away. I have a cat and a dog, and the cat will go run under the bed. And if I get down under the bed to poke him with a pipe, he's gonna hiss at me because he's afraid. He's afraid that I've lost my freaking mind and I'm gonna clock him with a steel pipe. So, I mean, they certainly have values. They value your life, and they value their life, and you could see the fear reaction. Furthermore, a lot of dogs are famous for protecting their masters, or protecting their family, and you can see their value that they have. First of all, you could tell they value you because the way they look at you with love, in their eyes, the way they come to the dog will wag his tail, and come to the cattle, jump up on your lap and purr. You can see that the animal loves you, and values you. And dogs are famous for protecting their family, especially children, from some kind of assault. There was even that famous case that went around the internet a few years ago of a cat, a house cat. This wasn't like a lion or a tiger, but a little house cat, female house cat, who the kid who had adopted her in the family was under attack by some dog. The dog was dragging the kid off his tricycle in the driveway. You could find this on the internet, I'm sure. It went viral a few years ago. And this cat this tiny little 10-pound cat came running out of nowhere, leaped through the air, slams herself into the dog. The dog has no idea what just hit him. It's a big dog. He has no idea what hit him. Just some flying object came hurtling into him. The dog turned and ran away, and the cat chased him away. It was unbelievable. But this little female house cat chased the dog away. He was mauling the boy that she loved. And animals will do that. Dogs in particular. They'll show their love very often by protecting the people they love. So they certainly have values. They don't value in the way human beings do, because they can't possibly understand the kinds of things that that we understand. But within the limited range of their cognitive capacity, yes, they definitely value, and you can see any number of examples of it. Oh, by the way, try keeping your dog hungry for a few days. Again, don't try this at home; it's cruel. But as a thought experiment, and then you put the bowl of gravy train down in front of the dog and tell him or her, "Hey, on second thought, there are dogs starving in India. You can't have this food. I got to send it off to the starving dogs in some third world country." Well, that dog's going to be mighty unhappy because he or she definitely values dinner. Which as an American I can understand, since we're proudly the fattest people of history, and we live to eat.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, I have a question, which is a lot of people get their values from popular culture, from films. They don't have the chance to get it in their family, so they model themselves from athletes or films. And it's a lot more fun for people to watch someone who's doing drugs or having lots of sex or stuff like that, things that don't involve sacrifices, and values a lot of the time involve sacrifices. So do you have any opinion on popular culture and values? And how do you reconcile those things?
Again, human nature, our rational consciousness that is part of human nature gives us the capacity to make choices in life. And so people, people who are very value oriented, let's say they want to get an education in, fill in the blank. They want an education in physics, in literature, in computer science, or whatever, and they want a career in that field. They might still indulge in popular culture and watch, watch reality TV shows or something. So it can have a a role in the elements of popular culture can have a role in such a person's life. But people get their values from watching TV. Well, excuse me. I suppose that's possible. But TV is part of reality, right? So well, we get our values more fundamentally by observing reality, and by getting out into the world and exploring it, which includes going to the library or ordering books from Amazon and reading serious issues. But at the end of the day, people make their choices. They get their culture from keeping up with they get their values from keeping up with the Kardashians, or they can get their values from reading the Fountainhead, or they can get their values walking down the street. If you read the Fountainhead, for example, Howard Rourke, the hero, this revolutionary architect, presumably, Ayn Rand chooses not to show his childhood, but presumably he lives in some small town. Presumably, he sees construction projects going on in his town. He's fascinated by building. You could see him hanging out with the construction workers and them taking this young kid under their wing, putting a hard hat on his head and teaching him to do this, that, the other thing. And the kid's fascinated with the process of building. And this is how he realizes he wants to build. He wants to be an architect. There's reality is enormously fascinating to a rational person. There's so many different ways in which to find that which will fill your life with meaning. So TV can be part of that. You can watch a football game on TV, and or more likely, if you live in Europe or various parts of the world, football's being played in the park or at school or something. So, I love this game. You're playing. I love this game. I want to be, I want to bend it like Beckham. I want to be a football player. And so forth. There's many different ways in our immediate purview. Whether exploring the world literally, or exploring the world of books, or exploring the world of the internet, or the world of popular culture. There's many different ways to find that which will fill our life with meaning. The key thing is to make good choices. I see these kids who, some cases, are very intelligent, and God knows they could have done lots of good things with their life, but they choose to become drug dealers or gangsters, and life expectancy is often like 18, 19, or 20, and the leading cause of death is homicide. So it's a tragic choice, that somebody makes, especially for somebody who's really intelligent and who could have had a much different, much better kind of life. It's heartbreaking.
Hi, Dr. Bernstein. Bit of a wild card question here. I've been really enjoying your lecture from Ocon regarding heroes in literature, and there are a lot of great resources regarding aesthetics in books. I was wondering if there's anything that you find objectively valuable when it comes to music or films or other forms of media, things that you find really kind of carry a sense of life or are very exultant in that respect.
You mean particular works of art or works that theoretically analyze art?
Yeah, so if we take music as an example, less like particular works and more like characteristics. I've heard Yaron Brook speaks about music sometimes, certain periods or types of classical music and kind of characteristics that he finds appealing. I was wondering if there's anything, whether it be rock, pop, other genres, anything in that kind of field.
Well, I don't know the first thing about music theory. I just know what I like. And similarly in painting. And in regarding what I personally like is I have very eclectic tastes in music. If it has a melody, I'm probably going to like it. If it doesn't have any melody, I'm going to turn it off. So you can probably tell from earlier examples, I don't like metal and I don't like rap. But that's my taste. I don't. It's not a moral issue. I don't condemn people. I don't condemn people who do. But I love a lot of classic rock. So I'm talking in the UK. So the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, bands that I grew up with in the '60s. I loved back then. I love today. a lot of the American rock of that era. Classic rock, Dylan, the Allman Brothers, to the Grateful Dead. A lot. There's a lot of classic rock that I like. My daughter's 15, so I know a lot of the pop singers that she likes. I got to say, I think Lady Gaga's talented. I think she's freaking crazy, but she's talented. I like some of her music. I see they're doing a remake of A Star Is Born, the old Judy Garland film with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. I'm looking forward to that. I've seen the trailer a number of times. It looks good. I like Lady Gaga. I like Adele. There's a number of pop singers I like, even country western. I like a lot of the classic country western, like Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, stuff. If it has a melody, I'm inclined to like it. Certainly, a lot of classical and romantic music. I love Chopin's piano music. I love Beethoven's. I love Beethoven's piano music. I love the Ode to Joy in Beethoven's Ninth. There's Puccini in opera just wrote the most beautiful melodies. There's a lot of really beautiful melodic music in the world of all different genres. A lot of American jazz. Cole Porter, for instance. I could listen to Ella Fitzgerald singing the Cole Porter songbook or the Gershwin Brothers songbook for hours on end, and in fact, I do. So I think there's a lot of beautifully melodic music in the world, and that for me is the acid test. Does it have a melody that I that just appeals to me? If it's non-melodic, I'm not gonna like it. So, but that's just my 2 cents. That's just my personal taste. And similarly with painting, I don't know the first thing about painting, but I know what I like. And at the Frick in New York City, there's actually several paintings of Turner. Who from what I can make out later on in Turner's life, everything in his paintings kind of dissolves into fog. And I can't say I really like it, but a lot of his earlier work is just crystal clear, and I like that kind of clarity. There's a couple of his paintings at the Frick in Fifth Avenue in New York City that I really like. But anyhow, I'm no expert on these fields. Literature I know well, but painting and music, I just know what I like in those fields.
Oh, great! Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi Andy, it's Telly again, probably for the last question. We had an amazing session, an hour and a half, and we covered pretty much everything. So I've struggled.
This has been fun. How you doing, Telly?
Yeah, no, very good, very good. So, Raz is like poking me. Come on, find another question. And I think I've got one which we haven't covered. We went through animals, politics, and everything. I've got a question because I've got, last time I saw you, I told you that I've got young kids. So wanted your thoughts about our values and how we grow in life. What are the values that the kid has and how important they are and how they change whilst they go through life. I was thinking in particular all these tiger moms who tell their kids, come on, you need to be, what are you going to be? Are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be a lawyer? I don't know, probably how Rourke's parents were like that. You need to be an architect, you need to be an architect. And do you see any harm in that, into getting all those external elements influencing your values from an early age and not letting you decide on your own? Don't know, yeah? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Telly. Thank you. Yeah, I'm opposed to that tiger mom mentality. And I remember seeing a book. I was in Barnes and Noble in defense of the tiger mom. And if I could be misremembering and misquoting. So let me just say in general, if somebody believes that I don't care if the kid's happy or unhappy, but my kid is going to be enormously successful as, you'll fill in the blank, a pianist, a corporate executive, a scientist, an athlete, whatever it is, then I think that's very mistaken. As I said before, in the objectivist ethics, the goal of life is to be happy. It's not, the goal of life is not to be a great pianist. If you love the piano, then being a great pianist will make you happy. But if you don't love the piano and you have to play the piano because you're only a kid and you're under your mom's jurisdiction or your dad's and they're shrieking at you, then you might become a very accomplished pianist and also be miserable. The goal is to be happy. So I think the cardinal principle of child rearing is help your child identify his or her own values. I don't try and impose my values on my daughter. So I'm a bookworm. She isn't. I'd like to see her read more. I encourage her to, but I'm not going to mandate that she has to read. It's not what she loves. I think she'll come to it more as she gets older. But we, as parents, we need to help the child identify what the child loves and guide them in the sense that if it's something that's life destructive, the kid wants to be a drug dealer, you guide them away from that. That's not the way to conduct a human life. But you might want the kid to be a scientist and the kid wants to be a dancer. Well, then, dancing is an absolutely legitimate goal in human life, and so is science. And if the kid wants to be a dancer, then you encourage her, or him in that case, to be a dancer. If you remember the film Billy Elliot, you encourage the kid who wants to be a dancer. Dancing is an absolute, absolutely, great field of human life. But the job here of rational parenting is help the child identify his or her own values, what he or she wants out of life, not what mom and dad want out of their life. They're not servants of mom and dad. They're individual human beings with values of their own. We need to help them identify what their values are and then help them in every way to achieve their values. So, my daughter just completed a 4-week pre-college program at Barnard College in architecture and studio art. She has some interest in that. We'll see if it develops into a passion. Well, I have no interest in it, but I'm not because Penny, you got to go study philosophy or literature and be a writer like your dad. That's ridiculous. That's not what she loves. That's not what she wants. So it's very important to help the child identify his or her own values. Just like I was saying before, Peter Keating's values were architecture and Dominique Frank. Those are great values. The problem is they weren't his. He pursued them to satisfy other people, including his mom, not to make himself happy. So it's important to guide the child and to help the child identify his or her own values, not try to impose our own values on the child. That's really important to the child's well-being and happiness. So I repudiate that tiger mom mentality that I don't care if the child's happy, they're going to be enormously accomplished. No, the goal here is to be happy. Being accomplished in life is a means to that end.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bernstein.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, and you're welcome, Professor Ginsburg. That was
And live in person in London.
Yeah, well, Skype is Skype. It's the next best thing to being there, right? But
although when you're here, we see your whole face, so that has its advantage.
Yeah, well,